A Viking ship could appear hundreds of miles inland before local rulers even realized the coast had been breached. That was the terrifying part. The Vikings did not move like medieval armies. They moved like weather. One week, traders unloaded silver beside crowded Scandinavian docks surrounded by green hills and rainy summer skies. The next week, similar ships appeared deep inside foreign river systems where nobody expected northern warriors to arrive at all. Monks heard rumors before they saw sails. Villages received warnings too late. Messengers on horseback struggled desperately through muddy roads already useless against enemies traveling by water. And once medieval Europe understood what was happening, the Vikings were often already gone. That speed shocked the continent because the Viking world should not have been capable of moving this efficiently. Scandinavia was not the richest region in Europe, not the most populated, not the most politically organized. And yet Viking merchants, explorers, raiders, and travelers crossed enormous distances with a level of mobility most medieval kingdoms could barely match. The reason was not only the longship, it was the entire system surrounding the longship. Picture summer harbors alive with movement, shipbuilders dragging timber beside muddy shorelines, crews repairing sails heavy with salt and rainwater, merchants shouting over barrels of dried fish, iron tools, walrus ivory, fur bundles, and foreign silver carried from lands thousands of miles away. Nothing stayed still for long. The Viking world depended on movement constantly: fishing, trade, exploration, raiding, communication, and societies built around movement begin thinking differently from societies built around walls. Most medieval kingdoms treated oceans and rivers as obstacles separating regions from one another. The Vikings treated them like roads. The longship changed medieval geography completely. Not because it was enormous, because it was flexible. Most medieval ships struggled in shallow water. Many required proper ports, deeper harbors, and predictable coastlines for movement and resupply. The Viking longship ignored those limitations. It moved through rivers, coastal shallows, narrow estuaries, wet marshland channels barely wide enough for larger vessels to enter safely. That changed everything. Picture green river systems winding through forests and farmland during warm northern summers while longships slide silently inland beneath morning fog. Villagers working fields near the riverbank suddenly stopping as unfamiliar sails emerge from bends in the water. No giant fleet, no massive warning, just speed. The ships themselves remained surprisingly light for their size. Crews could drag them across short land crossings when rivers disconnected temporarily. Some vessels moved from one watershed into another using nothing but manpower, logs, mud, and raw coordination. To medieval Europe, this felt almost impossible because kingdoms still depended heavily on roads. And medieval roads were terrible. Rain turned them into swamps. Broken bridges delayed communication for days. Dense forests slowed armies dramatically. Meanwhile, the Vikings traveled on rivers that never needed paving. Water carried weight more efficiently than horses ever could. Food, weapons, trade goods, and information, everything moved faster by ship. And perhaps the most important detail is that Viking ships rarely traveled empty. A crew arriving in one region might become traders. The same crew months later might become raiders, then explorers, then merchants again. Movement blurred categories constantly. That unpredictability made the Viking world difficult to track and almost impossible to fully control. But ships alone do not explain Viking speed. The real secret was information. The Norse built one of the most active movement cultures in medieval Europe. Travelers carried news constantly between settlements scattered across coastlines, rivers, and trade routes stretching from the North Atlantic to the Byzantine Empire. Picture crowded summer marketplaces beside muddy harbors filled with noise, smoke, rainwater, animals, and people arriving from distant regions every day. A trader from England discusses coastal defenses near wealthy monasteries. A sailor describes safer routes through dangerous river systems. Merchants exchange information about storms, politics, silver shortages, and local conflicts spreading across Europe. The Viking world learned continuously, and information moves power. Most medieval kingdoms communicated slowly. Orders traveled through chains of authority across fragmented territories where roads and weather constantly disrupted coordination. The Norse worked differently. Their trade routes doubled as intelligence networks. And because Viking society remained highly mobile, information spread remarkably fast compared to many kingdoms organized around fixed local authority. The result was adaptability. If one route became dangerous, crews shifted elsewhere. If a region strengthened defenses, ships attacked softer targets farther away. If trade became more profitable than raiding, movement continued anyway through commerce instead of violence. The Viking world adjusted constantly. That flexibility terrified medieval rulers because predictable enemies are easier to stop than adaptive ones. The Vikings rarely attacked according to schedules kingdoms could fully anticipate. They followed opportunity, and opportunity changed constantly across medieval Europe. One year England became vulnerable. Another year Francia struggled with internal conflict. Elsewhere, river systems opened pathways deep inland where almost nobody expected Scandinavian ships to appear. Again and again, Viking mobility overwhelmed slower political systems, still reacting to problems after the Norse already moved beyond them. The Vikings also traveled faster because they carried less. That sounds simple. It was revolutionary. Most medieval armies moved slowly because they dragged enormous logistical systems behind them. Supply wagons, heavy cavalry, large camp infrastructure, political bureaucracy controlling every stage of movement. The Vikings preferred speed. Picture longships landing beside green coastlines during rainy summer evenings, while crews pull vessels directly onto beaches covered in wet stones and seaweed. No giant ports required, no waiting for harbor permission, no complicated unloading systems. Within minutes, people, cargo, weapons, and supplies moved inland through forests, rivers, or muddy coastal roads, already disappearing into darkness beneath cloudy northern skies. Then the ships vanished again before local forces fully organized resistance. This created psychological panic across Europe. The Vikings could appear almost anywhere connected to water, and medieval Europe contained enormous amounts of water. Rivers became invasion routes. Trade centers became targets. Monasteries near coastlines became exposed well-storage sites visible directly from the sea. The Norse did not need permanent occupation to destabilize regions. Speed itself became pressure. Trade slowed after repeated attacks. Communities abandoned vulnerable settlements. Kings spent fortunes building defenses against enemies who rarely stayed in one place long enough for conventional warfare. The Vikings understood something medieval Europe learned too slowly. Mobility changes power. Fast systems force slow systems into permanent reaction, and reactive societies almost always struggle against enemies controlling movement. That pattern repeated for centuries, not because the Vikings were invincible, because they repeatedly arrived before medieval Europe finished preparing for the last attack. Vikings traveled quickly because the entire civilization adapted around movement. Longships alone were not enough. The rivers mattered. The harbors mattered. The trade networks mattered. The information flow mattered. The seasonal timing mattered. Every layer strengthened every other layer. Beautiful Scandinavian coastlines filled with green forests, crowded docks, muddy shipyards, fishing villages, noisy marketplaces, rain-soaked roads, and longships moving constantly beneath gray summer skies were not isolated frontier settlements disconnected from civilization. They were parts of a transportation network stretching across medieval Europe long before most kingdoms fully understood how dangerous that network could become. And perhaps that is the most important part of all. The Vikings did not move quickly because they were stronger than everyone else. They moved quickly because they understood systems better. Rivers reduced friction, ships reduced delay, trade spread information, mobility created adaptability. Meanwhile, many medieval kingdoms still relied heavily on fixed defenses, slow communication, and regional authority struggling to react quickly across enormous territories. The Norse exploited every weakness movement exposed. Again and again, Viking success came not from overwhelming force, but from arriving faster than opponents could organize effective resistance. That difference changed European history, because once one civilization learns to move dramatically faster than another, geography itself begins changing. Forests stop protecting isolation. Coastlines stop providing safety. Rivers stop acting as barriers. Everything becomes connected. The Vikings understood that transformation, centuries before much of medieval Europe, finally realized what was happening around them.